Every 5 days, a man kills his family. That's over 225 cases since 2020. Just a sick and shocking statistic. Infamous cases include the wrestler Chris Benoit, who killed his wife Nancy and son Daniel, and the most famous one, or infamous one, is Chris Watts, who killed his pregnant wife Shanann, their unborn son Nico, and their 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste. Today we're going to look at the Mormon Haight family, which sadly became part of the statistic in January of 2023. So without further ado, let's get morbid. What are the signs that someone may end up as a family annihilator? Well, to put it bluntly, most are men who have fragile egos and they don't handle humiliation well. They are often controlling and see themselves in charge of their family, so when their position of leader of the family is threatened, they can lash out. There is often a history of domestic violence, a history of unemployment or underemployment, meaning they aren't working full-time or they're in a position where they are way overqualified for it, or it doesn't pay enough for the amount of skill or experience that that person has. And finally, financial strain in general. They feel that they don't have control over their lives the way that they should, the way that they feel they're entitled to. And when it comes down to the actual act of murdering their whole family, it's often because they don't want their life to change as it would with a divorce, or it can be a way to punish their family for not being completely obedient and subservient. So why not just take themselves out and leave their family behind? Family annihilation could be an in-the-moment impulsive act, or it can be a way of, quote, saving their children. They may kill their spouse and then proceed to kill their children, saving them from living in this world without their parents. The humiliation of having a father who killed their mother and is in prison for the rest of their life, or possibly to save their souls from perceived spiritual corruption. You should also note that the areas with the highest numbers of family annihilation are in the South and Midwest, where the politics are conservative, guns are dime a dozen, and gender roles are traditional. I would also like to mention that the mere presence of a handgun in the home increases the risk of a family being killed by 7 times. Just food for thought. This particularly applies to Mormonism. Mormons are overwhelmingly conservative, with 60% being conservative and only 10% identifying as liberal. Back in 2020, a survey showed that 47, that's nearly half of Mormon households, own at least one gun. And then Mormonism is very traditional when it comes to gender roles, and I mean very. Mormon men are the only ones who can do blessings for the family, have any real position in the Mormon church, and are the only ones that can hold the priesthood. The Mormon church also teaches that the man is the absolute head of the family, the one who communes with God. A quote from Miss Magazine put it very well. It's not hard to see how a worldview in which men are entitled to respect, authority, and control over their female partners and children would beget domestic violence. Another quote says, their birthright, authority over others, and a wife who would take care of the home front, and obedient kids, and a job providing for a middle-class life, and respect from others. Many seem to expect this to materialize regardless of what other choices they make in their lives. These are not relationships to be cultivated or things to be earned, but benefits owed. Meaning, no matter how bad of a father or husband the man is, he should have the most loyal and subservient wife and perfect children. And if they don't meet his expectations, then it's their fault, not his. Then, there are many times that men are forgiven for their abusive behavior, but then go on to perpetuate that bad kind of behavior again. These men are given chance after chance, but it is still shocking when a man murders his wife, her mother, and their 5 children, and then the obituary comes out and it portrays him as a family man who always made time for his family. The man slaughtered his family. He didn't deserve an obituary. Or at the very most, it should have said something like, he was born, he murdered his wife and kids, and then he offed himself. End of story. Since we are already talking about that face, let's really talk. Let's look at the innocent people of the Haight family. Gail Earl, the matriarch, was born in 1944, the youngest of 7 children in a Utah Mormon family. She got married at 20, and her husband went on to have 7 children of their own. Gail was described as a loving and dedicated mother and made sure that each of her 7 children were deeply loved. She enjoyed helping people and her community, and she was good at making friends. And she was also a devout Mormon. She was a woman who loved traveling, quilting, and especially playing the piano. She also loved to share her love of the piano by being a piano teacher. Gail's daughter was Tasha Haight. She was described as an incredible mother of 5 who constantly made sacrifices for her children and saw them as her reason for being. She taught her children how to be good people and good to the people around them. She also raised them to be devout Mormons, just as she'd been raised. She loved to read and travel, but of course her favorite way to spend time was just being around her kids. The oldest of Tasha's kids was Macy, who was 17. She was known for being a big help with her younger siblings and was always helping them with their homework and chores. Macy was only months away from graduating from high school, and she was planning on going to Southern Utah University for digital marketing. Briley was 12. She was a kind soul and loved music. She played the cello and, of course, the piano. But her favorite thing was reading, and she often talked about how she wanted to grow up to be a librarian. Eamon and Sienna were the twins, and they were 7. Eamon was a very imaginative boy and loved building things, especially with Legos. He also had a love for trains. His twin sister, Sienna, was described as a vibrant kid who was also a great student. She was known of her love for taking pictures, and especially ones with filters. Gavin, the baby of the family, was just 4 years old. He was known for being a playfully mischievous kid who gave the biggest hugs and loved tickling and being tickled. These are the innocent people who had their lives stolen from them by the person who was supposed to keep them safe above all else. Michael freaking Haight. What a waste of space. I will certainly not make the same mistake that someone else made. After murdering his entire family, someone actually had the gall to write an obituary talking about how great a father he was. And then that obituary was taken down. No surprise there. Who the hell thought it was okay for even a second to praise a man who literally slaughtered his wife and 5 children, and his mother-in-law? But you know what else I find even more infuriating than that? Just 5 days before Christmas and 16 days before the tragedy, do you know who showed up to the Haight family house? Utah's Child and Family Services. Why? Because Michael Haight was being investigated for throwing his 7-year-old son to the floor. Michael had been yelling at Eamon to get ready for school, but he was sick. When Tasha backed up her son and told Michael that he would not be going to school, that he was sick, Michael got angry and threw his child, a 7-year-old boy, to the floor before storming off. Interviews were done, and then a home evaluation was done. Do you know what they looked for? If the house was clean, if there was food in the fridge, and if the house itself was safe. But you know what? We all know that that house was not safe. That house was anything but safe as long as Michael was in it. And it probably won't shock you to know that that wasn't even the first time that some type of allegation was thrown towards Michael. There were records of alleged abuse going back years, 4 years, before Michael had been investigated on 2 separate occasions where his oldest child received injuries. She was about 13 at the time. Nothing was done even years later when Macy, the oldest, told the caseworker that she was afraid of her dad. She told the caseworker that he became aggressive whenever he was challenged, even minutely, and he often used his large stature as a way to intimidate his children. That grown man stood over his children, towering over them to make himself feel big. How pathetic do you have to be to need to scare your children, literal children, to make yourself feel powerful? I'll tell you, that man was weak. Tasha could never do anything right in his eyes. He'd call Tasha fat all the time, and when she began to lose a good amount of weight, he accused her of having an affair and wanting to look good for this imaginary lover. Tasha at one point decided that she wanted a dining room table, a new one. The old one was getting worn out. But Michael then blamed Tasha, saying that it was the children that destroyed the table and it was her fault because she couldn't control them. So she decided to refinish the table instead of getting a new one. But that wasn't good. Michael got angry with her for spending money without getting his permission first. He never saw her as his equal or his partner. The oldest, Macy, was excited and happy the day that her dad was served divorce papers because she knew that she'd be able to get away from her toxic father at least for a decent amount of time. Then, 2 days after the most recent visit from the state, Tasha revealed to Michael that she was done and that she had filed for divorce. But oh no, a man like Michael who needs control can't have that. If they got divorced, he wouldn't be able to have the total control over his family that he craved. In fact, in the past, he'd threatened to off himself or make Tasha's life hell if she ever left him. Turns out, he wasn't kidding. The investigation after the murders revealed that 9 days after Tasha had filed for divorce, 2 Google searches were done at the Haight house. One was, quote, "Can you hear a gunshot in a house?" and, quote, "Can neighbors hear gunshots?" What a psychopath. It's one thing to plan the murder of your estranged spouse. That is a very old story, ancient even. But to plan on killing your children and to go on living as normal for at least 4 days, knowing that by the end of that week, your children would be dead by your own hand, and to continue to tell those children that you love them every night is beyond sick. And the night before the family were all found, Michael had told his kids that the next day they would go sledding together as a family and that he loved them. So fucking sick that there are no words. Then, in the last days of 2022, Michael took all the guns out of the house. It's not known where they'd gone, but he probably did it to stop his family from having any chance to protect themselves. On January 4th, Tasha was supposed to have had an appointment with someone from an organization that helps victims of domestic violence. And when she never showed up, they were very concerned. People knew about her volatile marriage. That person didn't waste any time and contacted the local police asking for a welfare check. That quickly became a missing persons case, and then people realized that no one had seen any of the family that day. Michael worked for an insurance company, and he never showed up to work that morning. And you know what also pisses me off? What the police did, or rather didn't do. At 11 a.m., but also at 2 in the afternoon, after received separate welfare checks regarding the Haight's, the police showed up to the door. Since the doors were locked, meaning that the house was secured, they decided that there was nothing left for them to do, so they left. Mind you, the family had a history of abuse. The mother had just filed for divorce, and oh yeah, the police called the school and learned that not one of the 5 children had gone to school that day. Yet, they left the house twice. Side note, for those in abusive relationships, the most dangerous time is when the victim tries to leave the relationship, knowing that the police should have never left. Unbelievable. The neighbors decided that enough was enough, and so they did what the police wouldn't. They broke into the house to try to check on the Haight family. Unfortunately, those poor people found a body. At that point, the police would go back to the house for the 3rd time that day, but this time they actually entered the residence. And after doing so, they found body after body after body.
Cedar 673, prioritize this channel. I have 2 deceased on the bed. I'm going to clear the home.
The investigation that began that day.
We got another one deceased right here.
The house. Most were discovered laying in their beds.
Kansas City Police Department.
Not only Tasha and the children were found deceased, but Tasha's mom, who had been staying with them since the divorce papers were served, had also been found deceased in the home. And finally, the monster himself was found dead by his own hand. He'd gone through the house at around 3:30 in the morning and took the lives of each person as they slept. My only hope is that no one woke up to see that the person killing them was the person who was supposed to love and protect them above all else. He left behind a note that blamed his family for the atrocity that he committed. And of course, he blamed them, because narcissists never take accountability. Michael Haight was physically, emotionally, and financially abusive to his family. And it turns out the divorce papers probably weren't the only last straw, so to speak. Turns out that he was expecting to be fired any day because he had been stealing money from the company that he worked for. So Michael probably felt that there wouldn't have been anything left for him to live for. Pity he didn't just off himself. His children had so much to live for and so much more life to live. Michael Haight was nothing but evil incarnate and didn't deserve his family. And that's it for today. If you found today's video interesting and you want to see more from me, hit the subscribe button and like this video. In the comments below, write what you think we should do with remains from people like these. Personally, I think the family annihilators should be buried in cemeteries filled only with violent sociopaths like them, where people can go and legally spray graffiti on their graves so that they can spend eternity being remembered for the monsters that they are. Anyway, I'll see you soon for my next video and the final one in my series on evil Mormon parents. Thanks for watching. Be merry, but stay morbid.